If you're someone looking to do your first audit in the UK, or let's say you've done audits before but didn't get the chance to actually finish them, or it took incredibly long, what we'll be looking into today is how to identify the right topics for audits and actually do a full first and second cycle within a period of 3 to 6 months, in the hope that this can be appropriate for people who do a rotation in a particular department, and that helps them get into the training specialty that they want. My name is Hassan. I'm an IMG who came to the UK in 2022 and luckily started my EM training in August of 2023. And in today's video, I'll break down the steps of picking the right topics to do an audit on, who to seek help from, and how to actually get the cycle done in a very short period of time. Personally speaking, I've been involved in audits where I was thinking that I can start them and finish them in a 6-month period. Next thing you know, it's either broken down completely after a couple of months, or it took much longer than that, or even the results weren't particularly exciting or convincing. And so I understand how overwhelming the process can be, and how we can learn from our mistakes and hopefully start to do audits that are impactful. So the first step that we'll be talking about is to actually identify a problem. And I know this sounds quite obvious, but I think this is where I got wrong in what I got wrong in the past, and what probably the majority of the people get wrong is that they choose a problem that is either incredibly difficult to track back in terms of data collection, or takes a very long time to show an effect, or is not particularly of much interest in the department that you work in. So, or even a combination of all of the above. So there are quite a few things to consider before actually jumping in, and I think taking the time to actually consider these things will save you a lot of time in the future. The first way is just to start noticing the problems that are in your department. So what do people discuss as a common issue that is a point of frustration, a point of pain for everybody, or that is, especially if it's something new, or even if it's been there for a very long time, but everybody's identified it as really inconvenient, and that can sort of be something for you to audit and act on. Unfortunately, this is not always enough, because there are so many problems, as we all know, in different departments in the NHS, and not all of them are easy to solve. And this brings me to the next point, which is you need to find something that fulfills a set of criteria for it to actually be done in a period of 6 months. So the first thing is the method of data collection for that particular problem needs to be straightforward. I'll give you an example. You could do an audit where you have to order notes, if you work in a paper-based hospital like I do. Order a set of notes where they send you this big folder of the patient's notes, and you have to go through their admission, what happened during admission, and try and find out and decipher a doctor's handwriting, as opposed to finding a problem that can actually be tracked back through IT systems, like tracking bloods or imaging. So thinking ahead in this step of how will my data actually be collected could really sway you towards doing the audit or not. And that can really save you a lot of time and effort to the future you in a couple of months. Another thing is that you want to actually do an audit that would demonstrate a difference eventually in your second cycle. And that's the reason why it's best to identify problems that are actually affected by one factor. I know this is really difficult, and most things are affected by multiple factors, but if you identify a problem that is mostly or predominantly affected by one factor that you can omit or change, then the results are not swayed by other things. Your results are very clear to demonstrate and are very convincing, and that's what actually drives change. There are two other ways you can find problems to solve in the department. One is to talk to a consultant, because consultants are sort of recognized to, or expected rather, to be part or lead audits as part of quality improvement for the department. So they need to show a level of activity, so that they usually identify problems that the department needs to work on, because they've been working there for years and years. And if you were to approach them, they can always find something for you. Now, this is a double-edged sword. And why is that? Because sometimes they might just want to show activity through audits and QI projects, but not necessarily something that would be useful for you and for your specialty training application, because it might be a project that you will eventually have to hand over to someone else to complete. It's really difficult to collect data for. It's really slow, not very impactful. So just be careful of that. Be mindful of what to expect, and don't always just say yes to whatever you're given. Another way is just to have a read online for the problems that your department faces across the entirety of the UK. Sometimes these are mentioned in conferences or even sort of learning platforms for the Royal Colleges, where you can pick some ideas of problems that the departments face and then have a chat with a consultant. So now that you've identified a problem that is easy to collect data on, straightforward to show an effect on, you have a consultant on board on the actual project, and you've identified a major problem that your department faces, the next step is to actually plan your audit. So you can do it through a PDSA cycle. I'll link some websites that describe the cycle in details, because it can be incredibly boring to listen to. So after you've planned it with identifying the problem, what you think the impact of your change would be, how you're going to go on about the actual intervention, and what you would do in your second cycle, what you need to do next is to actually show it to your consultant, because they know how the day-to-day changes in the department take place, who to talk to about change, who actually needs to be informed when it comes to, or contacted when it comes to data collection, who to talk to when it comes to the actual intervention. You need to be sort of presenting your issue to the nurses, to the junior doctors or registrars, in order to have an impact. So if you show them sort of a general idea, a quick meeting of what you plan to do, and you can get a lot of advice that will eventually save you a lot of time, rather than emailing people, not getting replies and then getting back to them. That will just slow things down. Let's say that you've identified the problem and you've got around 4 or 5 reasons why this issue in your department exists. So one way you can go on about it is using something called the Pareto method, which essentially is breaking down the fact that 80% of your problems are caused by a particular 20% of the issues, and that if you focus on these 20% of the reasons why you have the problem, you will actually achieve a much better result than trying to tackle every single cause for the problem. So that's just a general idea to give you that you should be task focused on particular reasons why the department faces that problem that we're talking about, just to be efficient, to have an impactful change. And then the next thing would be, if you'd like, you don't have to do this, but a fishbone diagram can also help you identify reasons, very, very specific reasons for your problem and how to tackle them. I'll link a YouTube video on the fishbone diagram that I found incredibly useful. This is completely extra, but it does also show that the way that you're doing your audit is actually quite professional, rather than just having a slide with a few sentences there stating the problems, and that's it. There's nothing wrong with that, but this is just an extra if you'd like. Another step that would make the process quicker is if you're able to assemble a very small team of people who can help you, because you might need to lead an audit and show a change in this audit in order to apply for your specialty training, but an F1 or F2 might just need to do some data collection to show sort of activity when it comes to audits. So they would be a lot less interested in the entire process, but also they'd be enthusiastic about doing the bits that would save you a lot of time, which is, for example, going on an SDT day and doing some data collection from bloods or ECGs or imaging. One of the last things that I'll talk about might not be for everybody, but this is just my opinion. Use as much time as you can when you're off work to actually process the audit as quickly as possible. I know that we don't necessarily get as much SPA time to work on all the many different things that we need for applying to specialty training, but sometimes you just have to do things on your off time, to be honest. That's just my opinion. That's how I had to do it. I used to have to go there on off days, on weekends, and just collect the data or talk to people and just get things rolling quickly rather than waiting for this one SDT day that I get a month, and there's no way that I'd finish a cycle. Once you've got to the point where you are finished your first cycle, you've made this sort of intervention and you're just collecting data to show the effect of your second cycle, then start thinking about when the next departmental meeting for audits and QR projects is, and if you're able to actually book a spot to present your findings, because sometimes these meetings are done only once every couple of months. They can be booked quickly, and if you don't get a hold of the next slot, then you might have to wait longer. And as you know, training applications open in particular times and close in particular times. You want your audit to actually be completed by then and not sort of stalled just because of such a basic reason. So think ahead of time is what I'm trying to say for all of these steps, and you can save a lot of time. And this is just from somebody who's gone through doing audits and not finishing them and learning from the mistakes. So I really hope that this video is useful to you, and I wish you the best of luck.